Zappy boy, fuck yeah, you show that elemental power. BFA is gonna be awesome. Son of a bitch! Hey, at least we are still loving the elemental, which feels like an actual spec with mechanics, so let's kick it with the talents, gear, corruptions, rotation, and a whole lot more tips and tricks to zap some class into your spec. Man, what the fuck is with this corny script? Before we tell your ass what to pick, a quick disclaimer. There are mainly 3 builds played currently, although not in the same amount. The standard raid build, the AoE-centric Mythic Plus build, and one more niche that has crept up in 8.3 that we won't really recommend, but we'll mention it throughout the video. On the first row, take Echo of Elements. This baby gives you a second charge of Lava Burst, and any situation where Lava Burst would be reset, you instead get a second charge. Essentially, this funnels your damage into Lava Burst, which is very ideal considering this is the playstyle of Elemental in BFA, specifically because of an Azerite trait. Having this also gives you more instant Lava Burst as well, which helps with mobility and synergizes with a talent down the road. Earthen Rage performs better in dungeons and generally high-octane AoE fights like Hive Mind. Elemental Blast can work for the niche build and not what we recommend you start with, but worth mentioning. This also requires you a whole different set of stats, traits, and plays with the Vision of Perfection Major, but more on that later. Next up, we have Totem Mastery Baseline. Overall, this is the best DPS option on the row, especially in raids. You have to have them up at all times, and they do have a range outside of which you get no benefits. This can make the skill a bit annoying on the very intense movement fights, which aren't very many that would force you outside of its area effect. Alternatively, and better in dungeons, go with Aftershock. This will give you a chance for your Earthshock and Earthquake to refund their Maelstrom costs, giving you potential back-to-back casts, especially of Earthquake in AoE scenarios. You usually take this since in dungeons you often move from pack to pack, and recasting Totem Mastery every time is a goddamn pain. Not to mention, Aftershock will give you AoE burst potential, which outclasses consistent DPS output in Mythic keys due to the nature of the content, where you want high amounts of damage at infrequent intervals whenever your tank pulls big. Third row, you have a defensive row and a few options. By default, you can go with Spirit Wolf. This makes your Ghost Wolf stack a passive 4 times, with each time increasing your damage reduction and movement speed while inside the Ghost Wolf form. This is good when you know you will take prolonged takes of damage that are very inconvenient to heal or could actually kill you. Or maybe you simply need the added movement speed, who knows. The other options are situational and mostly cater to what your group needs, and hardly ever will they force you outside of Spirit Wolf. Moving along, here we get to another important row. Master of the Elements complements the standard build that focuses on giant-ass meatballs and Earthshocks. It works well with Echo of the Elements, where you can weave in Earthshocks or Lightning Bolts in between Lava Burst cats for maximum efficiency. The other option is Storm Elemental. This baby works well in dungeons and for the niche build we mentioned earlier. Mostly you will take this in Mythic keys paired up with another talent down the road. Next up, another utility/defensive row. The default, safe, and easy pick is Nature's Guardian. This procs a small heal on your ass when you get really low. Overall, it can take your HP bar out of the danger zone and potentially save you from lethal damage that could follow shortly after. The alternative, which has seen way more use in 8.3, is Windrush Totem. This will help your whole raid transition from boss phases that you have to move a lot from point A to point B by giving them a swift kick in the ass by activating this baby. Particularly good on Rathion. Don't be a pleb, be a good boy and break some wind. Row number 6. Hey, you mean 6, right? Goddamn virgin. The 6th row brings about 2 options again. Ice Fury pairs up with the Master of Elements build. This will give you a source of nature damage for the buff, but more importantly helps you with mobility by giving you strong frost shocks to cast while you have to keep moving. It can be a bit overwhelming to juggle all the procs and consume all the buffs properly, but that's why this spec is so amazing, man. I'm telling you. If all the specs in the game had at least as much depth and playstyle quality as Elemental, I would stop trashing Ian. Maybe, I don't know. Shut up. I'm only human, man. The other option is Primal Elementalist. This is taken in dungeons almost exclusively, as well as paired with the Storm Elemental always, to make your pet stronger and have access to one of the strongest pet abilities in the game. It still performs in raids when you don't need to move a lot. You will gain the Eye of the Storm pet ability that will do massive damage, and you can check the screen for a good macro for it. Been using this baby and never failed. The idea is to cast Eye of the Storm after the elemental has empowered itself with Cold Lightning, which usually happens automatically as he casts his first shit. The macro works even with Fire Elemental for the Meteor spell it has. Lastly, get Stormkeeper on the last row. This provides you with burst damage, more instant cast spells, and good targets for both Master of the Elements and Storm Elemental builds. There will be situations when you can switch away from it if you don't have to move as much, or on fights like Maut where the burst of Stormkeeper will kill you. Unlimited power is a good alternative, a set and forget option that works for the niche build. But honestly, you can actually sim this entire row since all options are viable at some point depending on your gear and previous talents picked. We recommend you stick with Stormkeeper though. As with all DPS specs, the only real way to know which stats to pick, you will need to sim, since simming usually has the best mathematical answer. With that being said, to keep it simple, for the Master of the Elements build with Ice Fury and Echo Talented, you want versatility, crit, and haste on equal amounts, about 30% of your total secondaries, with Mastery down the list. This is to give you a point of reference to follow, and the theory crafting has been done by top elementals, one of which, Stormy, has graciously provided us with help and feedback for this guide. What a champ! In dungeons and for the Earthen Rage / Storm Elemental / Primal Elementalist builds, you want crit and haste at the top, about 40% of your total secondary stats for each, with Verse and Mastery lower down the list to about 10% each. When choosing consumables, again you have to base them on your stat priority, what you have less of, what you need to complete, or simply sim on raidbots.com and see which performs the best. To keep things simple though, and for the sake of the guide, get the Accord of Critical Strike enchant for the rings, with 1 Leviathan's Eye of Intellect for the first socket and Deadly Lava Lazuli for the rest. The weapon enchants can be Torrent of Elements for pure single target, or Machinist's Brilliance for the general purposes. Get the Greater Flask of Endless Phantoms for your 1 intellect buff, and Potion of Unbridled Fury for the best single target damage, with the superior Battle Potion of Intellect performing better in AoE. The food, no surprise, get a feast if possible and or accessible, otherwise sink your teeth into McDowell's Big Mac. You know, the classics. We gave you the crit consumables to keep things simple, but ideally you can and should swap some of them for their versatility counterparts. Which ones you choose to do that for will depend on you, your gear, and character situation. Versatility is usually really good in tough content since it provides damage reduction and you are squishy enough as it is, but since it's not top for all content and builds, we went with the crit options that will never fail you. Just to make sure there are no confusions, there are 3 builds here. The Master of the Elements with Ice Fury build that blasts meatballs, the Primal Elementalist with Storm Elemental build that works better in dungeons, and the still Primal Elementalist build with Storm Elemental that takes Elemental Blast and maybe even unlimited power as talents. This is the niche build we have been referring to, and one that performs better at higher item levels. So, start with Igneous Potential stacked 3 times. This trait will increase the proc rate of Lava Surge to 18% with an added bonus damage to your Lava Burst, which stacks really well. Considering you will play Echo of the Elements, this trait scales even further and really should be used for both Raid build and the AoE build. Natural Harmony and Heart of Darkness should be taken in all the rest of the slots ideally. Raw stat gains are the second best traits you can get on your elemental, and seeing as how whatever build you're playing, you want at least 2 stats to be very high, having multiple stats buffs will be ideal. Alternatively, if you do mythic keys more seriously, you can get a Tectonic Thunder trait to buff that Chain Lightning. paired with the Aftershock talent will cause some serious damage in high M+ pulls. If nothing else is available for you, although you really want the above, you can go with Lava Shock and Synapse Shock traits, the latter one being especially good for the Storm Elemental build. As for the secondary traits, Overwhelming Power, Unstable Flames, and Elemental Whirl will be your best choice, cause, again, stats. Although not what we recommend, if you plan on doing the niche build, aim for Natural Harmony or Heart of Darkness above Igneous Potential. The niche build focuses less on lava bursts and more on getting storm elementals out. Other than this, sim, if you really want to be a maverick, you should seem to see what rebelling will cost you. In terms of major essences, in raids you have two options since you only want to focus on the more single target oriented builds. Condensed Life Force will be your default choice. Adds a bunch of haste and really it's the best one for the Master of the Elements build. If you plan on the niche build, get Vision of Perfection. This complements the build and without it you have nothing. This will switch your focus from meat bolts to lightning bolts or bolts. Bolts sounds better, okay? When Storm Elemental is out, and it will be out a lot, you want to spam lightning bolts and raids usually force you to move a lot and waste said procs, lowering your overall damage. Something to think about. For miners, Conflict and Strife, Breath of the Dying, and Whirlwind Resonance are some of the most solid choices. You can play around with other options as well, but some have some specific conditions you need to meet, while others simply need to be simmed to see if they are actually better, provided all of them are at rank 3. In dungeons, use Blood of the Enemy Major at all times. Works the best for that burst damage you have been building up anyway. Miners will be very similar, like Conflict and Strife, Breath of the Dying, but also Vision of Perfection that works well with the talent setup giving you more freaking elemental casts. Purification Protocol is a good alternative for raw damage always, if you have the rep. There are actually quite a few trinkets that work really well for your Elemental Shaman. Actually, I think all of the raid trinkets are good. Psyche Shredder and Obsidian Claw seem to be the most popular and perform the best in all scenarios, but mostly raids. In dungeons, you can go for some of the more stat-focused options like Manifesto of Madness and Humming Black Dragon Scale. The first one can be a bit tougher to get since it drops from Nazad, while the latter drops on the first raid boss, which is not too shabby. There are other haste and crit trinkets both in raids and in keys that you can loot, so don't feel too concerned into getting just these. There are two weapons you can loot from the raid that also have corruptions. Markova gives you the Flash of Insight corruption. It can perform decently well and can be worth an extra coin roll. Vorzukal is not. Void Ritual is decent, complements the I like secondary stats concept of Elemental, and is a good choice to keep until you get better stuff, but likely a prime contender for the Cleansing Ritual of Mother. That better stuff being actual corruption effects that can proc on any item with any tier. Isn't BFA wonderful? Reminds me of that game I played that one time when I was drunk where I had to coin flip heads 5 times in a row to see if I won. Infinite Stars will be your best single target choice here, or at least best in slot, but expensive as shit. Gushing Wounds, on the other hand, provides you with the best DPS per corruption point for single target, being also very cheap. Toilet Devastation is not as great as people might think, even though on paper it gives a lot of damage, simply because of the way the effect works. You don't really and cannot really stay in melee range 100% of the time to get the most out of this one. And we already mentioned Flash of Insight, which is good in all situations, not just single target. As last options, Expedient and Severe are good corruptions to have on higher item levels. The increase in raw stat they provide can really scale well, especially if you can stack them, and they are cheap in terms of their corruption costs as well. The standard opener sees you precast Stormkeeper at about 4 seconds before the pull. Totem Mastery next with pre-pot and everything. Precast Lava Burst and Flame Shock instantly. Cast your Elemental, then cast Lightning Bolt. Cast Ice Fury next and continue with the spell priority as normal. As far as the priority of your abilities goes, Totem Mastery will be number 1 to make sure it's up. Keep Flame Shock up and even refresh it if it has 6 or less seconds left. Cast your Elemental on cooldown, ideally with a haste buff if possible. Cast Earth Elemental as well. Cast Lightning Bolts if they are buffed by Stormkeeper or Master of the Elements. Cast Earth Shock if it can be buffed by Master of the Elements. Cast Stormkeeper on cooldown, or you can delay it a few seconds to hit multiple targets if possible. Prevent Maelstrom capping by casting Earth Shocks. Frost Shocks next if they are buffed by both Master of the Elements and Ice Fury. Lava Burst on cooldown next. Frost Shock if it's buffed by Ice Fury. Cast the actual Ice Fury next on the priority list. Refresh the Totem Mastery. Filling with Lightning Bolts or with Frost Shocks if you have to move. The rotation is a bit bulky here, but these are the abilities you want to cast with this priority if the conditions for them are met. Takes a little practice, but pays off in the end. In AoE, always cast Stormkeeper on cooldown and use it for Chain Lightnings. Try to maintain at least 3 Flame Shocks, especially if the mobs will live long enough. Spend Maelstrom on Earthquakes. Make sure you use the Elemental Eye of the Storm ability if you are playing the AoE build like we recommended. Generate Maelstrom with Chain Lightning as a filler. There are about as many variations to the rotations as there are talent combinations and traits and essences. We gave you the simplest version, keeping it as complete as possible as well, which will set you on the correct path. However, you can and should go into more advanced stuff with your Shami once you are comfortable, and the good source for that will be the Storm, Earth and Lava website and the Earth Shrine Discord channel, where you can get in touch with top-class information and top-class elementals. One of which, Stormy, which writes the Icy Veins guide and graciously helped us out with a few fact checks and feedbacks for the guide. Thanks, Stormy, you're the man. The man? What about the men's and the women's? The Patreons. We want to thank you from the bottom of our heart for all of the support you continuously show month by month. This improves the quality of the videos. We want to make sure we deliver quality guys for y'all, quality WoW news on every week, and that's really hard to do when you're not having support from wonderful people such as yourself. So thank you once again. And with that being said, I want to thank you for watching the video. Enjoy your elemental shaman. Bye bye.